Welcome to Season 3 of The Business Gist, where we're always talking about the human side of the bottom line. In this season, we're talking to business owners on how they're navigating the worldwide pandemic, what they're doing to pivot, and how they're making tough choices between people and profit.
On this episode of The Business Gist, we are speaking with the CEO of Wayside Recovery Center, Ruth Richardson.
Thank you so much for joining us at The Business Gist today. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Good. Well, as we start our conversation, would you mind just taking a moment to introduce yourself and your company and tell us what you do?
Sure. So, Ruth Richardson, and I'm the CEO of Wayside Recovery Center. And we have been doing business for 66 years in the metro area. And we started 66 years ago with a shelter with 7 women. And fast forward to today, we serve more than 700 women a year and more than 350 children. And we provide substance use disorder treatment services. We work with individuals with co-occurring disorders, meaning they have not only an underlying addiction, but will have a mental health diagnosis as well. So we provide inpatient residential treatment, we have outpatient treatment, permanent supportive housing for women that are in recovery so they can get really solid within their recovery and stay with us as long as they need to before moving on. And one of the really innovative programs that we're really proud of, we were one of the first organizations in Minnesota and one of the first in the nation to start a family treatment program that's located in Minneapolis, and it allows moms to come along with their little ones to inpatient residential treatment and receive services.
I have to imagine that makes it a lot more accessible for the moms than if they can bring their children with.
It does. It makes it more accessible, and it also gives families the opportunities to stay united. Right now in Minnesota, the number one reason that kids are being removed from their households is because of alcohol and substance use. And so with our program, it's a really great way to keep families unified while they work through the struggles of addiction and other mental health diagnoses, as opposed to having them have to separate from their kids in order to get help and services.
So with the pandemic going on right now, I've seen a ton of news headlines talking a lot about mental health, a lot of, just changes and needing for help and people reaching out. Are you seeing an increased need for your services?
Definitely. Prior to COVID-19, there were extreme challenges related to access for mental health services. People waiting weeks in order to be able to get assessments or to get in to get support. And so what we were seeing prior to COVID is actually just even more pronounced now because the needs are so much greater when you put a pandemic on top of an already stressed system. So what we're really seeing is people needing more access to services. We're seeing higher levels of anxiety, and one of the I guess great bright lights in all of this is we've been able to transition some things to telemedicine, which has helped to break down some of the barriers that individuals are experiencing. But we are definitely seeing an increase in services.
Can you talk about some of the barriers that are being broken down?
Sure. So in terms of, getting access to behavioral health care, be that addiction services or mental health services, so often within our communities, some of the common barriers that we hear from people in terms of being able to access is really related to, one, people don't know where to go. That's oftentimes a barrier. And so oftentimes relationships and referrals and word of mouth can be so important as people are trying to figure out where can I go to get help. And one of the second major barriers is often, can I afford it? And am I going to be able to get, access to quality services at a price that I can afford? And so we're constantly trying to be nimble to ensure that people know that we're available as a resource, but also to know that they can get access to quality services that they're going to be able to afford as well.
Good. Well, you are also in the Minnesota House of Representatives as well.
I am. I wear a couple of hats.
So I mean, between balancing the increased need for services and then just all of the care that you have to do for employees, and then how is that going for you?
And doing this work in the midst of a pandemic has really just, I think, shined a light on just how deep the needs are within our community. And to be able to, on one hand, be at Wayside Recovery Center and really focus on the day-to-day needs of women and children and families, it gives me an opportunity to really see what some of the real concerns are, and to be able to bring that lens back with me into the legislature, because it's that sort of that reminder that every decision that we make, there's a person behind it and there's an impact behind it. And that, I think, really helps to center me within the work that I'm doing. And when I was elected, one of the goals that I had from the very beginning was to ensure that voices that may not have been heard at the Capitol on a consistent basis would be centered and would be amplified. And so I think that I really have the opportunity to bring forward experiences, bring forward the powerful stories, and to be able to get people to think outside of the box in terms of how does this decision play out in real life for people, because all of our decisions make an impact on someone's life.
So, between the two hats that you wear there, and I'm sure you wear many other hats as well, it seems like you really are coming from a service-oriented background. What got you inspired to do both of these things?
That's a really great question. And in terms of, running for the state legislature, that was never anything that I planned on doing. So I like to think of myself a little bit as an accidental politician, and that way. I
That
didn't
might be
have,
the best kind, right?
well, I didn't have some grand plan of, well, first I'm going to do this and then I'm going to run for office. And my decision to run for office was really based upon what I was seeing happening within my own community that I love, but also being encouraged to run by a number of women who were great friends. And when the first person asked me, I thought, I don't know if that's right for me. Had a second person ask me, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. You're the second person to ask me that, like in a run of a week, if I thought about running for office. And within 3 weeks, I had 4 people say, you really should run for office. And at that point, I thought, should I run for office? But I think it really illustrates what oftentimes happens with women. It often takes multiple people asking us to think about running before we make that decision to run. And so that was sort of the path that led me to the legislature. In terms of the journey that got me to Wayside, that really, I think, started for me as a little girl growing up in St. Paul, because, I grew up during what was termed the crack cocaine era. And I know I'm dating myself here now with that reference, but what I really saw as a little girl growing up, as this epidemic swept across neighborhoods, and not just Minnesota, but across the country, I saw a number of kids being removed from their home. And my mom, who had just a lot of foresight and a lot of knowledge, and my dad along with her, opened up their home to a number of foster children during that time period. And not just, thinking about becoming a foster parent and receiving money for being a foster parent. They opened up their homes to relatives. They opened up their homes to provide kinship care. And oftentimes they were doing it without receiving anything, because what they really saw was a devastating impact within our community. They saw families being separated. They saw individuals being criminalized. And what they really wanted to be able to do was to ensure that these kids could remain connected with their family members, could remain connected with the community that they lived in, and could have some of that affinity and kinship around them as well. And so what I saw growing up was mass family separation, mass incarceration. The response was to criminalize it. And fast forward to today, when we see what the response is to the opioid crisis, there's one of, let's support people. Let's think about ways that we can provide family treatment so families can stay together. I oftentimes think back to that time as a kid and thinking about how much time we lost as a community to really support individuals with addiction and substance use disorders, because we're really talking about a health condition here. We're talking about something that needs medical attention. And so that was really the pathway, I think, that started me on a path towards service. And that's how I got to Wayside Recovery Center.
Well, your parents sound amazing, and what incredible role models to have, to open up your heart and your home to so many people, to help them have the best opportunity. That's incredible.
Yes, they are two amazing people. I will vouch for that.
Well, good. I mean, obviously, it opened up a lot of opportunity for you to think about what you wanted to do with your life. Let's talk more about Wayside. What you've talked about the increased need for services. What are some of the challenges that you're dealing with right now?
You know, one of the really big challenges in terms of being an inpatient residential setting, because we're a congregate setting,
Okay.
and everything that we're hearing about COVID-19 right now is about social distancing and ensuring that people can stay as safe as possible. So when you're in a congregate setting, for example, like our treatment center in St. Louis Park, that's a 41-bed facility. And now all of a sudden you're on a quarantine with as many as 40 some odd people, not including the staff, as you're thinking about that sort of concept. And then thinking about our family treatment center, where we have 19 family suites. We have women who are pregnant. We're able to accommodate women with up to 3 children within that facility as well, between birth to 11 years old. And we have a lot of little ones. We've got a lot of infants, a lot of babies, under 1, and toddlers. How do you social distance with a toddler? You don't,
Yeah.
How do you social distance with a newborn? You don't. And within our organization, I think one of the really big challenges is, even prior to the governor's stay-at-home order, our women were already limited to going out into the community with essential passes only. Because when we saw this coming down, in early March, we had to act really quickly. And one of the first decisions that we made was to really limit those passes to essential needs and services. So a big challenge for our women is the fact that they've been on a longer sort of stay-at-home order than most Minnesotans. And think about that, not just with, adults within a facility, but within our family facility. You've got school-age kids, you've got babies, and it creates some real challenges to think about, being able to support individuals during a pandemic.
Well, and people talk a lot about just the mental health aspect of isolation.
Yes.
I've got to imagine that's even more powerful in the situation that these women are in.
That is such an important issue, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, because the impact of isolation has impacts not only on adults but children as well. And with the little ones whose brains aren't fully formed, there can be even heightened concern of what that isolation can look like in terms of the impact of that long term. And again, knowing we had challenges from a mental health perspective pre-COVID, seeing that mental health challenges are increasing with a pandemic, we also have to be looking forward to post-COVID, because we will get post-COVID at some point. And when we're post-COVID, there are going to be even higher needs that individuals have as a result of that isolation. And so it's a really important issue not to lose track of.
How are you taking care of employees that are also working in these situations?
Yes, I want to take a moment to just shout out the amazing frontline workers that we have at Wayside Recovery Center within our residential treatment programs. We do a lot of work across many different parts of the organization, but the frontline staff within our women's treatment center and our family treatment center, they're really the unsung heroes. We hear a lot about, the doctors and the nurses, but our folks are frontline workers as well. Our inpatient residential facilities, we don't close, right? We don't close because there's a snowstorm. We don't close because of COVID. They're 24/7. And so with that, we have made a commitment to our staff to really be able to create the most healing environment that we are able to create in the midst of a pandemic. And so that includes having weekly calls like with our staff to be able to hear their concerns and to be able to just let them have an open Q&A with me and other leadership staff to say, hey, what's going on? Or to voice concerns. And so part of it has been really focused on building a lot of really good communication with them so that we have good safety protocols in place that everyone knows, ensuring that we have the protective equipment that we need so that they can stay as safe as possible, and ensuring that we are doing consistent education with families as they're coming in and with staff as well. Ensuring the signage is up so people know the rules about hand hygiene and all of that, but also really finding ways to honor folks who are really on the front lines, be that with paying hazard pay, because there's a hazard to being frontline and working within a pandemic. And so we want to be able to honor them with that. And we've provided things like gift certificates and meals. And we've brought in consultants to really help around wellness issues as well, walking through mindfulness, sharing different resources with individuals, because vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress is real, right? You're working in complex situations with people with complex health needs. That's hard by itself. And then you put a pandemic on top of it, it can start to feel overwhelming. So that is why, again, we're just trying to do all we can to support them, and even the anonymous lunches that we receive from time to time are a great pick-me-up for the staff as well.
That's awesome. So do you have people in the community then that are donating lunches?
We do. We've had lunches donated. We've had gift cards donated. Um, one of the first donations that we received, sort of once COVID, this pandemic was really becoming clear just how concerning it could be. We had in-person visitation for our families previously, right? They could see their loved ones a few times a week in person. And when we had to limit the facility to essential visitors, so many people in the community stepped up and donated iPads so that we could quickly transition to virtual visits for our clients and our patients. And it's meant the world to them to be able to still have that connection with their family and friends outside of the facility.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible because right back to the isolation piece, right? At least you still have that
Mhm.
connection back to the world. That's amazing. Um, you're a nonprofit, yes?
We are, yes, a
So
nonprofit.
have you seen any changes from a funding standpoint?
One of the things that I will say in terms of the response to COVID, there have been a number of grant opportunities geared specifically for nonprofits as it relates to personal protective equipment, being able to by enhanced cleaning services and thinking about higher needs for things, such as hand sanitizer. Those sorts of resources have been instrumental
Good.
to us being able to respond to this, and the outpouring from not only the foundation community in Minnesota, but also looking at the different programs that are in place at the local level in the cities, the counties, and the state. Right now, there is great access to dollars to be able to ensure that we have the protective equipment that we need if we can get it ordered. So the money is there. The next battle is how long will it take in order to get things delivered? And we have been just overwhelmed with the support that we've received, again, from the community. We've had face masks donated. We've had businesses that have donated face shields. And so we have what we need to serve our families safely, which is amazing. But we also know that this is just the beginning of this. And so our hope is, as the days and the months continue to go on, that we'll continue to have that level of engagement and support.
Good. Is there anything that you need right now that our listeners might be able to help with?
So there's always things that we need for sure. And some of the, I guess, highest priority needs that we have right now. General operating dollars are always perfect for us, because that helps us to pay for things like hazard pay for our frontline staff. Face masks are always in need because we consistently have people coming in and out of the facility, and so there's always a need for those. And then even things like diapers and formula for our family treatment center. And so, yes, we are always welcoming donations. So thank you for asking about that.
Good, good. Anything that we can do to help. How about lessons that you've learned either here or at the legislature as you've just really been dealing with all the shifts that are going on?
Well, I think, one of the most important lessons that we have learned, and I think that this just comes in the midst of the uncertainty of a pandemic, it's a reminder that there are a number of things in life that we just can't control, right?
So true.
Uh, we can't control this pandemic, and what we have really focused on with that is knowing that we can't control the pandemic. Let's focus on what we can control. We can control doing everything that we absolutely can to keep our employees safe. We can, think about what are all the things that we need to do to ensure that our clients and patients are going to be safe within the midst of this pandemic. And I think that's one of the most important lessons learned, not just within this pandemic, but just any time that you're facing any type of challenge, is about the power of hope. Because once hope is lost, then you may as well just pack up and go home. And so just being able to have the hope that tomorrow can be better, than what you're kind of sitting in right now, is sort of that idea that we continue to focus on, because operating in a pandemic is difficult. And even before a pandemic, I will just say, with the work that that we do every day, it's not easy work, right? There's easier paychecks to be found. It's also not the place to come to if you want to get super rich. So it's like there's bigger paychecks to be found, but there's a lot of passion and compassion within the folks who work within our facilities. And they do that because they have hope that they can support people and that their tomorrow can be better than today.
How do you keep that hope alive for everybody?
That's a really good question. And so I'm a firm believer when you are in a very tough situation, because with life, for better or worse, there are going to be tough situations. My sort of motto is, and this too shall pass.
I have to,
Because
right?
when you are in the thick of it, it can feel insurmountable. And how are we ever going to get through this? How are we going to, survive? And, it's sort of this continuous mantra, and this too shall pass. And it's like, it may not feel like it in the moment, it may not feel like it next week, but knowing that we will get past this, I think, is how we continue to be able to have that attitude of, we're not just going to sort of survive. We've got hope, and we've got the ability for individuals to be able to be supported through this, because it shall pass, and we've got the hope of a brighter future.
Good. Well, that's a great segue to my next question. You definitely are dealing with way more challenges than some other businesses are. What advice do you have for other leaders?
That's a really great question. And so, I think the one big sort of light that this pandemic has really shined on just businesses overall. Um, a year ago, I don't think anyone really saw COVID as we know it right now coming. And this idea that all these businesses could be shut down was just not something that we could comprehend.
Nobody planned for that, right? Even when you do your pandemic planning, you don't plan for everything to be shut down,
At the same time, and
right?
it was
Like
sort
maybe
of
your
this.
power goes out,
Yeah.
maybe, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so right now, I think some of the advice that I would give individuals is, um, definitely be on the lookout for any resource that can be helpful for you and for your business. There are uh, stimulus programs that are out there. Most folks are familiar with paycheck protection piece. And I know that there can be challenges with some of those things as well, because the rules may make it easier for some people to get those and harder for others. But one of the things that we did really early on, when we saw just how deep this financial impact could be, we wanted to make sure that we were methodically turning over every single rock for financing, right? And for support. It's like, let's think outside of the box. Let's look at all the different loan opportunities. Let's look at the forgivable loan opportunities. Let's look at maybe funders that we haven't looked at previously. And we've been able to secure some funding from organizations that hadn't worked with us within the past. And so a big component of this, I think, is being aware of what's going on in terms of where are potential programs that can be of benefit. And I would also encourage business owners to be in constant communication with your staff about what's happening and about what's going on. Because when staff are not hearing anything and there's silence, that can just increase the anxiety, that can increase the concerns of like what's coming next. And so one of the things that has worked really well for our organization is ensuring that we are communicating constantly. Sometimes I'm apologizing for sending so many emails in a day, but I want our staff to know what I know when I know it and when I can share it with them, so that they can feel that they are informed with what's going on and maybe what's coming next. And I know that we can't always prepare people for everything, but I know that staff really appreciate that transparent and that open communication, because silence, that breeds fear. And so we really try to avoid having that happen.
Yeah, I've definitely seen in my experience when, whether it's a situation or other situations, when you aren't sharing, even if it's not new information, it's almost that absence of information people make up their own.
Yeah.
Don't know where it comes from, but it's like, nope, this is what it is. And so, yeah, definitely, it's keep those lines of communication going. I had another guest on the podcast, and they said, once you think you've communicated enough, communicate some more.
Yes. And when it feels like, I feel like I'm communicating too much, you're doing it right.
Yep. Exactly. Well, do you have any other insights or messages or anything like that that you want to share before we wrap up?
I think I would just, I think the thing that I would close with is that, with our organization having a 66-year history, and there's a rich legacy there, there's a lot of stories there. And walking into 2020 and just the vision that we had for the organization and the hopes that we had, for what was going to be coming within the year, really hit a wall pretty early on when COVID became this huge issue that has just sort of dominated everything. But in the midst of the worst pandemic of our lifetime, I have just been completely inspired about how our staff have pulled together in the most difficult of circumstances. That even in the midst of a pandemic, they're showing up every day. They are working hard to create the most healing environment for our families. And so that what feels, again, so difficult right now and what feels so hard right now and like we're never going to overcome it, just again to leave folks with, we will get through this and this too shall pass.
Well, it sounds like you guys are doing just really, truly meaningful work and that you are making a difference in so many women's lives today. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to your staff for showing up for them and for each other. So if people want to find out more about Wayside and either how they can participate there or help or make a donation, where should they go?
They can go to waysiderecovery.org. And we really hope that people will take you up on going to the website to support our amazing staff because they're doing some great work in some really difficult circumstances.
Well, thank you to them. Thank you to you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me today. I really appreciated it. I just love hearing about the hope that you're putting back into the world for people. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on The Business Gist. Make sure to follow us at thebusinessgist.com.